Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. In Optymistychna in Ukraine, the ceiling drops behind 2 surveyors in the longest gypsum maze on Earth. At Golondrinas in Mexico, a bee swarm seals the top of a 300-meter shaft with a climber still on the rope. And at the Pearse Resurgence in New Zealand, a rebreather turns on its diver 90 meters down the coldest cave dive in the world. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On February 20th, 2026, Danilo Kovalenko climbed down a farm field shaft in western Ukraine and into Optymistychna, the longest gypsum cave on Earth. 260 kilometers of passage folded under 3 square kilometers of field. The maze is soft rock. Soft rock sheds slabs in a slow, quiet rockfall that never fully stops. He was surveying with one partner. 4 hours in along the marked line, 2 junctions resketched and back out the same passages. Danilo was 29 years old, a mapmaker from Ternopil who spent every weekend underground and had logged 300 trips in 11 years of maze surveying, the one his club trusted deepest into the labyrinth. His habit was the arrow. At every junction he chalked one, pointing home. Because in a maze, he told his brother, the way out is the only direction that matters. The plan was modest. 2 kilometers in, 6 hours total. What he didn't know, the winter meltwater had been working on a ceiling seam above their return route all month. Here is what you need to understand about Optymistychna. It is not one tunnel. It is a net, thousands of loops crossing and recrossing, so that any 2 points connect a dozen ways. That geometry is the mercy of the place. Lose your passage, and somewhere the loops offer another, as long as your map is good and your marks are true. And gypsum softens like sugar when spring meltwater finds a seam in its roof. The trip in ran sweetly, boots grinding on dry silt, chalk scratching its small arrows at each junction, tape clicking through the survey stations, 2 lamps threading passages the width of doorways under a ceiling of white crystal. Nothing failed for 2 easy hours, because the maze saves its failures for the way home. They finished the resketch ahead of schedule and turned for home along their own arrows. What they didn't know, 90 minutes earlier, half a kilometer behind them, the seam had let go. At the 4th junction home, that is when the passage failed them, because a slab the size of a dinner table had dropped from the seam and brought the roof rubble down after it. The marked way out ended at a wall of broken gypsum. The rubble still ticked and settled as their lamps moved across it, and somewhere beyond the wall of it, a last slab cracked down like a door closing. What he knew, reading the collapse, digging soft rock under a broken seam invites the rest of the roof down, and a caver pinned there would wait 8 hours for the nearest help. And that habit, an arrow at every junction, meant the maze behind them was still mapped, and in a net, another way around always exists. Panic scratched at the silence of the junction. The way home was gone. The roof still ticked. They were trapped. Nobody touched the rubble, and nobody said why. Because this is the arithmetic of a gypsum maze. The blocked loop cost them 1 route of a dozen. The detour around it ran 900 meters through 4 unsketched junctions. And their light budget held 18 hours against a 6-hour plan, deep margin, if none of it was spent on guessing. 2 surveyors stood at a fresh collapse. 1 net of loops lay around them, and every arrow on its walls pointed at a passage that no longer existed. Watch a mapmaker spend 11 years of habit in 1 junction. First, back to the last arrow, survey book open, and rebuild the net on paper. Which loops touched the blocked one, and which 2 junctions bracketed. Second, chalk a new line as they went. Fresh arrows doubled, so that even a wrong loop could be walked back without a single guess. Put yourself at that junction for 1 minute of it. A survey book balanced on a knee, passages identical in every direction. And somewhere above the paper, the soft, slow tick of a roof still deciding what else it owned. The detour ran clean for 3 junctions, and at the 4th, the loop pinched to a crawl that was not on their sketch. The one guess the book could not spare them, and tight enough to leave a hurried man stuck.
Danilo went through first, doubled arrows at his shoulder, and came up in a chamber whose far wall carried old chalk. His own arrow, 3 years old, pointing home. They walked out of the farm field shaft 4 hours late, into the last of the daylight, survey book intact, with one new passage on the map of the longest gypsum cave on Earth. Both surveyors survived on chalk and geometry, and the club's report ruled it a meltwater roof failure. The collapsed loop was closed and posted. Spring trips now carry a second marked exit line, and every survey pair turns around after 5 hours, logged with the surface watch before descending. The longest gypsum cave on Earth still spreads its net under the Ukrainian fields, its soft roof still shedding somewhere in the dark, its survey growing by a few hundred meters every season. Danilo still chalks his arrows at every junction, 300 trips on, and the club report's last line is his. The way out is the only direction that matters, he tells his brother. The maze took one of his passages. His arrows gave him back another. On April 26, 2026, Imelda Reyes stepped over the rim of SÓTANO de las Golondrinas, a cave shaft so vast that the swallows living in its walls take 15 minutes to spiral out of it each dawn, 330 meters of free air from the rim to the floor. One rope hangs the whole way. Everything that happens on it. She was descending with one partner, rappelled to the floor at first light, 3 hours of bird count work, and the long rope climb out before the afternoon heat. Imelda was 51 years old, a biology teacher from Aquismón, who had logged 400 descents in 22 years of vertical caving, the one her club sent down anything with more air than rock in it. Her habit was the mid-shaft stash, a sling, a liter of water, and a wrap of sugar tied to the rope 100 meters down on every trip, because the shaft gives you nowhere to stand, she told her daughters, so you bring your own ground. The plan was old and polished, down at 6, out by noon. What she didn't know, high on the east wall, 60 meters below the rim, a wild colony had been building all spring. Here is what you need to understand about Golondrinas. The shaft is alive. Swallows and green parakeets nest in its walls by the thousand, and so, in some years, do Africanized bees, whose colonies hang from the overhangs where no one can reach them. A climber on the single rope passes every tenet of the wall in turn, slowly, at the speed of 2 jammers. And because both hands are always busy, panic on a rope has nowhere to go. The descent ran like ceremony, rope hissing through the rack, birds pouring past her in a spiral river of wings, the far walls turning slowly as the great room opened below, the floor arriving green and soft after 7 minutes of air. They counted nests through the morning and started up on schedule, Imelda first. What they didn't know, an hour earlier, something had disturbed the east wall colony, and the climb would carry her straight past it. At 270 meters up, that is when the wall failed her, because the colony she had passed in peace at dawn was now a moving smoke of bees, and the low hum reached her before the first one did. On a rope, with jammers, there is no running. What she knew, hanging 60 meters below the rim with the hum thickening, climbing through a defending colony means hundreds of stings, and stings at altitude on a rope mean losing her hands. And that habit, her own ground, tied to the rope far below, was the only direction that made sense. Panic hummed in the air around her head. The way up was sealed. Her arms were burning. She was stuck. Down was the only open door left. Because this is the arithmetic of the great shaft. Changing from climb to rappel mid-rope takes 2 minutes of careful hands. The colony's patience ended 60 meters short of the rim, and the descent back to her stash ran 170 meters on arms already spent. One climber hung reversed on the rope. One cloud of bees held the exit, and the sun had 5 hours of afternoon left to spend.
Watch 22 years of rope work happen in silence. First, the changeover. Descender on below the jammers. Weight across, jammers off. 2 minutes of drill, done at half speed, with the hum 60 meters overhead. Second, down to her stash at the 100-meter mark. Clip the sling, drink the water, and hang on her own ground while the colony's smoke thinned above. Put yourself on that sling for 1 minute of it, wings pouring past you toward the evening, a rim of sky the size of a coin, humming, and your own hands, opening and closing, coming slowly back to you. The bees settled with the first cool of evening, the way they always had, and the swallows began to fall back into the shaft in their thousands. Imelda climbed the last 100 meters through the homecoming birds at dusk, lamp off past the wall that had stuck her there at noon, hands steady on the jammers she had rested for.
She came over the rim 9 hours late, into a circle of headlamps. Her partner had topped out behind her, and the village rescue watch was already brewing coffee at the anchor. Both cavers survived on 1 sling and 5 patient hours, and the club's report ruled it a wildlife closure of the route. The east wall colony was flagged on the rigging map. Dawn and dusk climbing windows became the rule in colony season, and every party now stashes water on the rope. The great shaft still opens its coin of sky over San Luis Potosí, still pours its swallows out in a 15-minute spiral each dawn, and its walls still belong to whatever builds on them. Imelda still ties her stash to the rope at the 100-meter mark, 400 descents on. The shaft gives you nowhere to stand, she tells her daughters, so bring your own ground. Hers held her for 5 hours, and it walked her out through the birds. On July 2nd, 2026, Greta Hoffman slipped into a mountain river on the South Island of New Zealand and started down the Pearse Resurgence, the coldest deep cave dive on Earth. A flooded shaft of white marble where the water holds 6 degrees from the surface to the far reaches. Divers here wear machines, not tanks alone. The cold is the second opponent. She was diving with 1 support partner, a rebreather pushed to 90 meters on trimix, 12 minutes of survey at depth, and 3 slow hours of decompression home. Greta was 37 years old, a hydro engineer from Nelson who had logged 600 dives across 12 years, the one expedition leaders wanted on the machines nobody else would service. Her habit was the 5 minutes. Before every dive, she pre-breathed her rebreather on the bank, eyes on the readouts. Because the machine tells you the truth, she told her students, before the water gets a chance to. The plan was precise. 90 meters, 12 minutes, every readout logged on the way. What she didn't know, the truth had a crack in it, thinner than a hair, in the scrubber canister lid. Here is what you need to understand about a rebreather. It is a closed loop. The diver's own breath circles through a canister of absorbent that strips the carbon dioxide, and the loop must stay dry. Let water reach that canister, and the chemistry turns on its owner, a caustic slurry the divers have a name for, and the name is the polite version. The descent ran silent, the way the loop always is. Solenoid clicking its tiny valve, bubbles absent, fin wash brushing white marble walls, 2 lights falling down a shaft of glass-clear water that bit through every seam of her dry suit. At 90 meters, she leveled onto the survey line, 12 minutes on the clock. What she didn't know. 6 degrees of cold had been working on that hairline crack for 40 minutes, and the lid had begun to weep. 8 minutes into the survey, that is when the loop failed her. Because the weep became a trickle. The trickle found the absorbent, and the first sip of caustic reached the mouthpiece with her next breath. Her throat closed around it before thought arrived. What she knew, coughing into a machine 90 meters down, the loop was poisoned, the drill was bail to open circuit, and the bailout regulator hung at her chest where her hand already was. And that habit, 5 minutes of readouts on the bank, had told her nothing because the crack had waited for depth and cold to open it. Panic met chemistry head-on. Her airway was burning. The loop was dead. She was trapped in deco water. The surface was 3 hours away by the tables. Because this is the arithmetic of a caustic hit at depth.
The bailout held 40 minutes of gas against 3 hours of stops. 6 degrees strips a working diver's core heat in 90 minutes, and a burned airway swells on its own schedule, caring nothing for either number. One diver breathed fire off a machine. One partner started up toward her from the line below, and every path to the surface ran through hours the gas could not pay for. Watch the drills spend themselves against the chemistry. First, she bailed clean, loop closed, regulator in, one practiced motion, and turned up the line with her partner's light rising to meet her. Second, he clipped his spare bailout to her harness at 60 meters, gave her the bigger gas, and took the wing between his hands to fly them both up the marble wall. Put yourself on that line for 1 minute of it. Every breath a swallow of broken glass. White walls sliding past at the speed the tables allow and no faster. And a number in your head. 40 minutes of gas, dividing itself against 3 hours, arriving at the same answer every way she ran it. At 40 meters, her breathing went from ragged to shallow, and at 35, on her partner's regulator check, it stopped. He brought her up through the last stops. He dared to shorten, holding the regulator in place the whole way, and surfaced into the river's daylight 50 minutes later, with the mountain cold already deep in them both. The support crew pulled them onto the bank of the Pearse and worked on her in the ferns while the helicopter came up the valley. Greta Hoffman died of a caustic inhalation and drowning at the Pearse Resurgence, on a machine she had serviced perfectly and pre-breathed for 5 patient minutes that morning. Her partner survived with a cold injury and a bent shoulder that took 2 chamber rides to settle. The canister lid, recovered with the rebreather, showed a hairline crack that only opened under pressure below 6 degrees. The inquiry ruled the death and equipment failure invisible to surface checks, and the expedition changed its law that season. Canister lids retire on a fixed count of cold, deep dives, not on inspection, and every loop now carries a moisture alarm wired to the readouts she trusted. The coldest deep cave dive on Earth still pours its 6-degree water out of Mount Arthur, still glass clear, still white marble down past the place at 90 meters where she died, marked now on the survey. Teams still come each winter, their canisters numbered, the inquiry's verdict and her rule printed together in the expedition handbook above the gear bench. The machine tells you the truth before the water does, Greta used to tell her students. The mountain found the one lie it could tell the machine. Count your lids, retire them cold.